Thank you guys who are joining us today. We appreciate seeing you all here. For those of you that don't know us or are just hopping on for the first time, my name's Mike.
I'm Pac. I'm Christian.
We're the Newbees. We do live hive inspections on TikTok and on other social media platforms. And today, we're going to do something a little bit different and talk to you about a very important issue that is right here hitting home in our home state. We're here with Mr. Alex Urban, a bee friend here out of Charleston, and we're going to talk to him about some things that he's had going on this year. If you've been following us for the past week or so, you'll know we've put out some information on this already. So hopefully you guys are ready to dive into some of what we've got going on here in West Virginia, how it's affecting us, and how it might affect others and other beekeepers in the future. So Alex, thank you so much for coming. We thank you for being here. It's great to have you on, and
thanks for letting
us take up some of your weekend time.
Hey, anytime for bees, I got time.
Awesome. Before we get started or get too far into this, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background, what you do, how you're into the bee world.
Yeah, so I started beekeeping. So I was originally raised in Sissonville. It's a more rural, agrarian place. Still kind of suburban. Well, as most West Virginians, you get raised in a holler. You get accustomed to the natural world, gardening, hunting, being out in the fields and the forests of our great state. And, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. She was, lived during the Great Depression, so, very self-sufficient. We canned a lot of that kind of stuff. And as all older people do, tell you stories of back when things were better, right?
Yep.
So we had a cellar, and in our cellar, that's obviously where we kept everything that was canned. And there was a little device that it had like a bellows on it, and it had it was metal, and I could not figure out for the life of me what that was. And so I asked her one day, what is this contraption? And it turns out it was a smoker. And when I'm in elementary school, middle school, when I think smoker, I think non-smoking. So I didn't understand why it was relevant whatsoever. And she said, well, you keep bees. And, as most people, lay people who aren't beekeepers, they think of, yellow jackets or wasps, or as we call them, waspers, right? So, I didn't understand. But she said, you get bees from honey, right? And sorry, strike that, reverse it, right? You get honey from bees. And, that's when I started doing a lot of research, getting how-to books, really diving into what it means to keep bees. Because I knew my grandmother's father, so my great-grandfather, he kept 3 hives back when it was probably a lot easier to
good old days. Yep.
Yeah, before Varroa and all that jazz. So I got into it, didn't realize how unique and of interest, the different breeds or strands or races of bees there are. Never knew that you could artificially inseminate a queen until you really dive into it. And so I was in high school when I first bought my first package of bees. They were Italians, and they were from Georgia, like a lot of package bees are.
Yeah.
And I have to admit that the first year was a complete failure, right? I had one hive. I was a newbie, so probably back then it was $130 for a package of bees, so I wasted that much money. But I was trying to do everything on the cheap. Built my own hives, my own frames, and then got my bees, they died that spring, and I just kept on it until I could keep them alive. So,
That's awesome.
That's the hard work.
Yeah, it
yeah.
is. And a very relatable story, I feel like, for
Very
a lot of
relatable.
beekeepers.
Right, so
That
we
first
didn't-
year is really rough.
And we didn't find this out until recently when we visited the folks in Florida, and somebody told us that if you only have one hive your first year, you're very unlikely to
Yeah.
make it through. Just the experience and reference and everything that goes into it. But it's good that that's really hard to stick through it and keep up with the bees.
If you don't mind me asking, how old are you now?
Oh gosh, 32. So
Okay, so it's been over what, 10, 15 years.
yeah. So I re I regularly kept bees. So even like during college and law school, I'm an attorney. So I kept some hives at my parents and would come down, tend to them probably every about 2 weeks, and harvest the honey. And yeah, that's the great thing about beekeeping is there's some science to it, but it's also a lot of opinion and art, and you practice
Artistry.
it, and
Yeah.
Ask 10 beekeepers, right?
Yeah, there's still
Yeah.
still some mystery in beekeeping.
Yeah.
yeah. And so yeah, I probably kept him for, let's see, until 2022, and then I bought my own place, and that's where we
Are now.
yeah, that's why we're here. So
That's where our journey begins,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Really, that's really, really cool, and it's awesome to hear your backstory
Yeah.
and how much passion that you have. I mean, keeping bees that many years, obviously you're passionate about it, and I don't know many beekeepers that aren't.
Yeah.
To play with bugs for
Yeah.
fun, you got to have some passion there. So let's talk about buying your house and continuing your beekeeping journey a little bit, because that'll lead us into the real meat and potatoes as to why we're talking here today. You bought your house, and what is the process for you trying to keep bees as a homeowner, as an adult?
well, so when I bought my house, so I bought my house in South Charleston, West Virginia, right? So it's its own independent, incorporated town. Had I bought a house in Charleston, I could keep up to three beehives. So there is a hodgepodge of, and I didn't realize this, surprisingly, there's a hodgepodge of, some cities allow it. Some cities you have to get a permit. Some cities it's a free for all.
Yep.
Some cities it's you just gotta abide by what we call in West Virginia the best bee management practices. There is little rhyme or reason. But so when I bought my house, I did my due diligence, and at the time the city ordinance was you just had to get a permit. So I was thinking it's going to be like a dog tag, right? You go down there to city hall or whatever, you pay $20, you get a permit, and that's it, right? Maybe you got to renew it every year or whatever. I
Sounds
bought
reasonable.
yeah, right. Very right, reason, very reasonable. So I bought my house. I liked it. I had a place for a garden spot. It was fenced in, so I could put my garden in there. And I was like, man, this is going to be great. Could put my hives in there, have warning signs around my bees. I could lock my gate to my fenced-in area. Being the homeowner, live happily ever after, right? So I moved in, I think in June or July of 2022. And I think that October I started like investigating. And I just happened to see on Facebook, because like South Charleston has like a South Charleston Facebook.
Right.
So someone had messaged about chickens, right? Not being able to get a permit for chickens. So I thought, and I'll reach out to this person, see what their experience was. And they were getting blanket denials. So that didn't seem hopeful, right? But I am not one to be dissuaded. So I applied, and I did a thorough job, right? I met all my neighbors, so I knocked on doors. I said, "Hey, can I get written consent to keep bees?" And all my neighbors, they're older, so they had memories of people keeping bees. And it wasn't it turns out it wasn't uncommon for people to keep bees in South Charleston. There's a history of it. Also, there's a long storied history of keeping bees in this state and just in this country in general, right? So, all my neighbors were excited. They thought, you know what, honey's going for $25 a quart right now. I could, be willing to sign on for some free honey. So I said, okay, whatever, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You never know what you're going to get. Some years are better than others, went into the whole ebbs and flows of Darths and, everything. But, my neighbors were excited. They were excited. I had grown a garden, so I would give them produce because, I'm just too
plenty.
You can only eat so much, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. You can only eat so much. You can only can so much. You only have so much time in the day. So, they were excited. So I applied, got written consent, explained, where it was going to be, explained that I was going to follow the state regulations, the best bee management practices I referenced, explained that, I wouldn't get in my hives. If there were people or their pets present, I would have warning signs. I would have the hives on a level ground. Just very common sense, and obviously so much so that our agriculture commissioner put them into regulations, right? So, and obviously none of this is legal advice. I'm not your attorney. Find an attorney. This is my just opinions, right? So, and in West Virginia, you have to register your bees. It is state law that you have to register your bees, right? There is a criminal offense to it if you don't. So, right, we as a state have said we really like bees, right? You've probably seen the Protect Pollinator, what's it, license plate? Yeah. Right. It's actually our state insect, right? So we as a collective society have said, yes, we like these things. Well, in South Charleston, I don't know if that's true. So I apply for the permit, go down, ask questions. I could tell that they were actively trying to dissuade me from getting honeybees. Just some of the absurdities that they said, that, what if some of your bees get caught in fly traps? Just off the wall things. Right. And so,
and what was your response to that?
I said, obviously I'm gonna respect, it could have been a legitimate question, right? I mean,
it could have been.
And so I took it as a legitimate question, right? If you don't know bees, you may not know, right? So, I mean, as you all know, the only bee that really matters is the queen, right? You can always replace workers and drones. And so I said, it would be like a hair follicle, right? If I lose some hair, it's going to be a little annoying, but I'm probably going to grow it back. Now at my age, it's beginning to thin, so I am more concerned there. But and so I took their questions very literal. I educated them. I was there for probably about 2 hours almost. Just educating them on bees, and I referenced the West Virginia Apiary Act. I referenced the regulations, what have you. And well, it turns out there's a reason why, there was this unofficial official de facto blanket rubber stamp of no. There has never been a permit issued in South Charleston. It was an illusory right or privilege, I guess. So they denied my permit, and so at that point, I retained counsel, and we filed in the Circuit Court of Kanawha County, stating that their denial of my permit was arbitrary and capricious, and it didn't make any sense because it didn't. And what they hung on in the main coherent argument was bee sting. I mean, good or for bad, I mean, it is a fact, bees do sting. I also drive a vehicle that goes 140 miles per hour, but I haven't killed anyone, knock on wood, right? Like to live is to live with risk. There's a reason why we call them the best bee management practices, because it mitigates danger, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we filed. They then amended, after we filed, they amended the city ordinance to have a complete ban on honeybees. It is now, I guess
After you filed, sorry, to clarify, after you filed, they amended the ordinance.
Yeah. So now, at that point, it became, in my opinion, a state issue, because you have beekeepers in South Charleston. There have always been clandestine beehives. Actually, and that's another thing that was really interesting, was they admitted one city official, and I will have to say, and I don't want to give names because it is an active legal matter, but at least there was one city official who saw the writing on the wall, and was advocating for honeybees, and said, I know of beehives in this city. It's actually interesting because, I haven't named some of these people, but I've taken pictures of these beehives and attached them to my court filings. So they're there. It would be almost silly.
Well, that's even if there isn't any beekeepers, the bees tend to make their way anywhere that there's space. We do outs all over the state, so it's really important to have
it's important to have beekeepers as a resource nearby
to have
just for that purpose.
Yeah,
I mean, we've done removals in downtown
Morgantown.
From the frat house,
almost every borough of Morgantown.
Yeah,
it's one of those things. It's a great resource to have, and even if we get calls about insects that aren't honeybees, and beekeepers are natural advocates for insects, so we're often able to answer questions like, do I need to spray? Do I need to do anything? And lots of times it's a simple, you don't need to do anything. And so people are just, more reassured when they have that, informed person to give them that reassurance, like, yes, they might be annoying right now, but come the fall, they'll be gone. If you just leave them alone, you won't have any continued problems, especially when it comes to like yellow jackets and stuff like that. We get a lot of those calls. So people always want to run to a can of, spray, and I'm always like, that can do so much more than just to those insects. So we need to be really careful, and it's important to have, like I said, beekeepers as a resource just nearby. About banning them, that's just so counterintuitive.
If you dissuade your bee experts, you're not going to have, if there's a swarm, if there's a unwanted hive, you're not going to have any bee experts nearby to help with that local
That's exactly
danger.
Right.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
A question I have is, do you happen to know what the current punishment for breaking that law is?
Yeah, it's pretty draconian. It's 30 days in jail for each day that you are found to have kept bees. So obviously I can't admit or deny to any the keeping of any bees. I would have to assert my Fifth Amendment right if I would.
We wouldn't ask.
But talk about draconian, a month per day.
That's just like that's a 30 times punishment.
That's nuts. Yeah. Oh, and to like an incarceration because of beekeeping just seems so
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, I mean, are we then going to make farming a felony,
Right.
Exactly.
right? Are we,
Where does this go?
What line are we skirting? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, if you want to talk government overreach,
Wow.
yeah, right? I mean, if
Right.
you and think about it, and I'm not much on conspiracy theories, but I mean, as you guys know, a third of our food is pollinated by honeybees, right?
Yes.
75% of the food that we eat has need of some form of pollinator, right? So you don't need to ban the keeping of bees. I mean, the ban food or like, you know, you just need to ban pollinators, right? So
To
I
control.
mean, this is the, you know, the crazy uncles, or you know, this is the this is what horror movies are made of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
absolutely.
the impression it gives off.
Well, and
Can
this is
go a
what
lot
gives
of places.
merit. This is what gives merit to those arguments.
Yes, it does.
Right.
Because
Exactly.
things like this cause people to think in that
It
way.
can leave such a bad taste in your mouth, such a bad
Absolutely.
impression.
And like you said, there was already the history of the troublesome part is the blanket denials, not even giving care to each individual person who took the time to build their case, to do all the
Sure.
things that's really inconsiderate of what you are and to everybody else that you're technically serving. We're all in a community.
One may say it's a violation of due process.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, at what point did the Department of Agriculture step in? So for like throughout the process, I know that at the beginning, you were being represented obviously by your attorney, but it was kind of on you at first. At what point did you reach out to the Department of Agriculture and them immediately back, or how did that come about?
Yeah, so and obviously this has an element of politics to it, but like obviously like I'm not political, like the bees should not be political.
Absolutely.
Being able to feed yourself or sell honey should not be political. So excuse my undertones of politics if this gets a little bit too much. But after the initial denial, before they amended the ordinance to say no bees whatsoever, and there was still this permitting process. I had written a letter to Kentley Hart's office, the agriculture commissioner, and there is a section in the code, in the West Virginia code, that constitutional officers such as Commissioner Leonhardt, excuse me, have the ability to ask the Attorney General's office for an opinion on the law. So I asked why, like, what was the stance of the commissioner's understanding of the West Virginia apiary law, right? Did it preempt local governments? Does it is the state the true regulator of the bees, as the way I read it and the way my attorneys read it? Or is it this hodgepodge of, ban here, permit there, maybe, I don't know. Do I like you? That kind of thing, right? So I think I sent that sometime. Also, all this stuff is foiable if someone wants to like cross-reference me, and I urge you to do it. So I think that was sometime in June, July, sometime. When they denied my permit in January, January of 20, and I'm gonna maybe get some dates wrong, but I think it was like January of 22 or 23. I can't remember. I was, hedging. Do I just give up this hobby that I love? Do I just, do not do this anymore? And so I was hedging, and it what really bothered me is other people were allowed to keep bees who may have be more inclined to be friends of the political establishment in my city. Though that's the way it was perceived to me. Where, at least if I don't know what the reality is. Maybe it's just, they're doing it clandestinely, whatever. But it bothered me. I don't consider myself a criminal. I don't think keeping bees or growing a garden should be criminalized.
Right.
So, the more I stewed on it, the more angry I became. And so that's when I approached my attorney and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Here's what I'm thinking. Tell me if you see it differently. Because no person can be objective to themselves, right? Everyone seems sane until someone else.
Right.
So, he agreed with me, and he said, I think you got something here. So, I think, as the old adage goes, you get more bees with honey than you do vinegar, right? So we were advocating, right? We went to city hall. We said, hey, you should really think about doing this. I think we went there in February. Also, those videos are up on the South Charleston City Council if you want to review those. We were trying to be professional. We were trying to be courteous to our neighbors, reasonable, if you will. Show that the leadership of the city had an opportunity to be on the right side of agriculture, of West Virginian values, of history, right? So, well, that didn't get the response that we wanted. I don't know what the thought process is. If I understood the minds of our elected officials, I'd probably be a richer man than what I am now, but I don't. So that's when I guess it kind of got kicked into overdrive of we're going to ban the bees. We're going to ban, we're getting rid of the permitting process. And so it culminated, I think I filed my lawsuit, my civil action in August 10th. And by August 17th, they had enacted the ban, right? So, and from what I remember, it was an overwhelming, we're doing away with the bees, we're criminalizing beekeepers. There was only one person who was on city council who voted for bees, and that gentleman happened to be new. He had just come into the position. So, whatever, you read the tea leaves for yourself. I'm not trying to give you any kind of perspective on one way or another.
Of course.
So when they passed the ban, I think the Department of Agriculture intervened, I want to say in October 20th-ish. And that's when they said
2023.
Is it 2023? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know better than I guess.
Yeah.
So they said no, we agree with Mr. Urban. It's I mean, we going back in a kind of full circle, if no bees, no farmers. And I always have this saying, if you've eaten today, thank a farmer, but praise a bee, right?
That's a good one.
All right. So how could agriculture, and it's just not in my city, right? And we were talking about how like bees fly, right? Like the very, very quintessential truths, if you will. There's studies, and some can fly as far as 8 miles, average about maybe 5, 4, it differs. One hive has the ability to affect farmers, people who depend on agriculture, far beyond just the jurisdiction of my city, right? It is the next city over. It is the county, right? Um, and so our agriculture commissioner has really understood the importance of honeybees. His leadership, really taking the helm of advocating for bees and beekeepers is, I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. Um, I thought I was going to be laughed at in the legal community, and I thought I was going to be, almost labeled like a kook. But it was nice to see, other, honorable people say, no, we have to advocate for these creatures, because we depend on them.
Absolutely. And like we've talked a little bit here back and forth, for those folks that don't know who are hanging out with us live here, West Virginia has the West Virginia Apiary Act of 1991, and it specifically invests the Commissioner of Agriculture in our state, which currently is Commissioner Leonhardt, to the power to regulate honeybees by allowing them to exercise the powers and duties imposed by the act for the purpose of protecting agriculture. Our state is not the only state to have an act like this. There are several other states. I don't want to say many because I don't actually know how many, but I know that there are several other states where
48.
bees are protected in this way. You said many?
48.
48. So there are many. There are many.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they would jump right to your aid, and we're so thankful that they did, because this could mean so much for so many people. So I have mentioned a couple different times as we've been talking here the year 2023. You'll notice that we haven't talked about anything that's happened in 2024 yet. What was the last progression of this? Where are we now?
Yeah, so procedurally, they file, the way you initiate a lawsuit is you file a complaint. There's typically an answer. The city filed a motion to dismiss, asserting that they have the authority to ban honeybees through it's Chapter 8, it's the municipal code. Then they passed the ordinance with the complete ban. So I had to amend, my attorneys had to amend the complaint. They filed a second motion to dismiss. We had a hearing on it, in addition to actually strike that. So initial complaint, motion to dismiss, we had a hearing on that motion. That's when the department came in, filed the motion for intervention. The court denied the motion to dismiss. The court said, this is there. I think there is some merit. I'm not going to dismiss this. The city admitted to the facts. Their attorney said what Mr. Urban has said. We don't need to parse this out. This is an accurate representation of what happened. We just think we have the authority to do this. So at that point, the parties, so my attorneys, the Department of Agriculture at that time, and the city agreed to do what's called motions for summary judgment, cross motions for summary judgment. And that just and obviously, once again, not giving legal advice, broad general statement of, we're going to argue in documents who's right. And each side can respond and reply to the other, and it's sort of like a big discussion, right? Three parties are having a discussion. I'm saying this, they're saying that, they're saying something else. I think you're right here, but you're wrong over here. So that was completed. And that was completed in March of 2024, right?
Okay.
So that it's been at that point, because it is an issue of, and this is me making assumptions, right? I want to clarify that. 2024 is a presidential year. There may be it's there's more optics than just bees, right? So we've been waiting for a decision from the court for some time. It could come down any day now, but apparently, I think, I'm very hopeful that it's going to come down on my side. And I would assume the city's probably thinking the same thing, but that's where we're at. We're just waiting. The wheels of justice turn slowly. Additionally, this has to do with the broader public policy of West Virginia. It involves a lot of people. So the court is obviously going to be doing research, looking at other jurisdictions, the case law, the ordinances, that kind of thing, thinking about it. And, the court's going to render a decision, for or against the bees and the beekeepers.
So what does that and just speaking broadly here, when that decision's rendered, do you think that that'll be the end? Do you think that a yes in favor of beekeepers will be just that, or do you think that there's the potential for this to move further, for the city to push further?
So, I mean, it depends, right? Do I think someone will appeal? Yes. If I'm successul, I'm obviously not going to appeal, right? The city,
right.
City
The city
probably
would
will.
be, right.
But I think it has the potential. I mean, you can't just appeal to appeal. There has to be a legitimate reason to appeal.
Right.
Kicking the rocks and saying, "Oh, gee, I lost." That's not how this works, unfortunately. But do I think there will be an appeal of some sort? Yes. And I think that's where the interest, and that's where I'm trying to get a lot of traction from other states, right? State beekeeping associations, because precedent, court decisions, what may be binding authority in West Virginia could be persuasive authority, say, in Iowa or Ohio or other places, right? So this holds the potential to protect all beekeepers, right? It's just not in West Virginia. It has the potential, and there could be, who knows? And this is kind of where it kind of gets in the nerdy weeds of things. So our concept of privacy rights, and once again, not giving anyone legal opinions or anything, but our concept of privacy rights in the due process of the U.S. Constitution all derive from a single footnote of a case. And so this case has the potential to protect agriculture, right? Not just beekeepers, but agriculture. I think there's a fundamental right to reasonable access to agriculture, right? I think there's a fundamental right to be able to feed yourself. Yes. It's a history that goes way beyond marriage or anything. There's nothing more basic than feeding yourself.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I just think that depending on how courts would perceive that, obviously other legal think tanks, it has potential to really help revolutionize and modernize our access to agriculture and beekeeping.
Absolutely.
Very interesting.
And that was actually going to be my next question. So you answered it there, and it was going to be, what does this mean for folks that haven't quite connected the dots yet on what this means for them directly? What does this mean for folks who aren't in South Charleston?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we would go up to, Supreme Court, right? If the Supreme Court would hold, yes, I have a right to raise honeybees, because of the Apiary Act. Regulation of honeybees is preempted through the West Virginia Apiary Act or the West Virginia Cottage Law Act, or the West Virginia Right to Farm Act. It would basically, chances are it would do nothing, right? People would still keep bees, but you wouldn't have to look over your shoulder.
We'd be
Yes,
protected.
exactly.
Right.
You would be protected. You wouldn't be facing 30 days in jail for each day that you house honeybees.
Right.
Like you said, gardening or preserving your own food, things like that.
Right. And things, it's crazy to me that we're having this conversation of, can a person raise their own food or sell their honey, right? I mean, there are nuances in the law, right? So I referenced the West Virginia Apiary Act. I mean, the West Virginia Cottage Law Act. That expressly preempts local governments from prohibiting the production and sale of what's called non-potentially hazardous foods, right? Listed in those regulations of what a non-potentially hazardous food is honey, right? How, and this is, we posed this question, right? How does one produce honey without honeybees?
Yeah, you don't.
If someone can answer that question for me, I would probably dismiss my case, right? But to me, it's just, honeybees are a condition precedent in order to get the honey, right?
Absolutely.
So, and we saw, my attorney cited some regulations of, I think in like 1963, there was the U.S. Department of Agriculture did like a study that like said beekeeping could help people on government assistance learn a new trade by being able to like sell their honey, right? So there's this opportunity on both sides, and that's what I love about this is it didn't seem political except for the city in which I live, right? The one thing that people on both sides of the aisle, right? Though I won't use labels, but they agreed, right? There to me, there you had the environmentalists who were like, yeah, we need bees, and then you had the people who hate the government saying, I hate the government. Why are they doing this? Right? And so it was this quagmire of odd bedfellows who said, yeah, we agree, we like bees, because most people do, because we need them, and
a great uniter.
yes, and one thing that I always try to let people know, beekeeping, honeybees transcends, and this is kind of like hippy dippy, but like transcends the human experience, right? I mean, throughout history, I mean, the references of honeybees or honey in religion, right, in your Bible, or your Quran, or your Vedas, it's amazing it's amazing what kind of reverence that we as a species have said, we like these things. We don't mind the potential danger of being stung. We like that sweet goodness of honey.
Since ancient times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just like bees don't respect borders, they cross boundaries, religious boundaries, political boundaries, geographic boundaries. That's what makes them such a unique experience. And like you said, it does transcend the human experience.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that's what's important too, because like, sorry, going back to like the blanket denials and stuff like that, beekeepers are a catalyst in their communities for the most part. Like it's not just beekeeping; it's making sure the right things are being stood up for. It's providing extra support to a community that might need it, or just being a solid person.
Yeah, there are countless resources. We're advocating for clean water, clean air. The different things that we know our bees enjoy. We are only advocating for them. Out of that respect for the environment because of the creatures that attach us to that environment so like deeply.
Yeah.
So it's like you said, very, very.
So
it's
then
transcendental.
it is. It absolutely is. And that leads me to my last question. And Alex, that is, what can we do to help?
Yes.
What is it that we as beekeepers in West Virginia and throughout the country and throughout the world even, we see folks from all over the world on social media and platforms like this. And a lot of folks wonder, what can I do from where I am to help folks like us continue our journey and make things right in the world, not only for beekeepers, but for everyone. So what can we do?
So there's multiple things that you can do, right? So if you are a West Virginian, right? One, we would like for you to send letters, if you could, to the Department of Agriculture.
And we'll link all of that information around the screen here when we post these videos later. So you guys will have all of that information to contact those folks.
And we are very interested in communities, incorporated communities that have made beekeeping unlawful, or there's an unreasonable inability to access beekeeping, right? Is it a denial, a blanket denial of permitting? Is it, just a complete ban like what we have in South Charleston? That's the kind of perspective, because the department is advocating for beekeepers in general, right? Like I'm advocating for myself. I'm a little selfish. I'm sorry. Right? So they're advocating for your interests, right? So they need to hear from your perspective. Additionally, if you're part of an organization, right? If you're part of the West Virginia Beekeepers Association or the Farm Bureau, maybe you should reach out to those organizations to say, hey, how can we help this? Right? How, there's different ways for, the power of one really matters, right? And I said I was going to use this analogy. This is my waggle dance, right? This is like, I need to show everyone where the goodness is, right? I need your help, right?
Yeah.
I am someone, I don't do TikTok. I don't do that kind of thing. I watch them. I don't produce them. So I've always been told I have a face for radio, not for video. So I need your help, right? I came on here to help spread the word. We have to protect beekeeping, right? We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect agriculture in general. Because what we do is so vitally important to everyone, right? When the aggregate, one beekeeper doesn't really matter, but 100 beekeepers definitely matter, right?
Exactly.
And so that's how you can help. I want you to send letters or emails to the Department of Agriculture, really talking about your experiences of being able to freely keep bees, produce honey, just live life. Because what we're trying to do here is what people have been doing in Florida, in Indiana, in Tennessee, much more populated areas. Washington, D.C., you can, the heart of our country, you can keep a beehive. We're not
We're not.
reproducing the will here.
Right.
No.
Right.
We're just trying to advocate for our rights, for what, at least what I believe is a fundamental right to feed yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we say thank you and let you go, because we won't keep you all day. Again, this is your Saturday, but we really appreciate you sharing with us. Does anyone on any of our channels have any questions? We got a few people here that have been watching us and supporting throughout this. And we want to make sure that if anybody does have any questions, that we answer those. That way, we have that content too to share later. I think we covered your base argument and your personal liability throughout what we talked about. That one was a earlier question. I think that throughout our discussion we've covered most of that as far as the argument for being able to keep bees in South Charleston and what your involvement is there.
What was there a question about liability?
The question was good.
It's one of our regulars. I believe it's South Carolina. Yeah, South Carolina or North Carolina, and they were stating that their state had sued the local authorities because the state had the governance of agriculture. And then she went on to say, her neighbors' gardens do well and they flourish ever since she's kept bees. And then asked about the base argument. I guess in challenge to you, like, was it the personal liability of bees? I reckon that's what she was trying to get to.
So, like in West Virginia, right? And it's interesting, a judge actually wrote the regulations, right? So the judge, I think he's a senior status judge now, Judge O'Hanlon, I think his name's Dan O'Hanlon. He wrote the regulations, or at least helped write the regulations, and you had this eye of liability, right? Like, no one likes lawyers. I don't like lawyers. Right? No one wants no one wants to get sued. I don't want to get sued. But in West Virginia, if you register your honeybees and you abide by the regulations, the way, there's a blank, unless you do something intentional or like knowingly to harm other people, you got a defense, right? Like that's just how much we like bees. Is we like them so much that we as a state have said, we're going to limit liability on beekeepers if you
abide by best practices. Yes.
Yeah, right. Just being a reasonable beekeeper, like don't throw your hives on people, right? Warn them that they're there, right? Don't get in them if other people are present that are unclothed, like without protection.
Right.
Just common sense, but that is maybe part of it. Who knows? But also that's why I don't know why the city would latch onto that when it was cited in my initial petition of like, hey, this is how this works.
Right.
Any other questions? Even dissenters, right? I mean, that's what.
We haven't
seen any much.
We've gotten a lot of support. I'll be honest. Folks have been very supportive. We've had a couple folks, even just from our initial read through of the news article that was put out last year that we did earlier this week. We've had a couple folks reach out to us asking how they can support and what contact information they can get. So
one more thing, Mike, I'm so sorry, I forgot.
No, please, I was gonna ask if you had anything else.
So the South Carolina lady, how could someone from out of state help, right?
Yeah,
we are looking for what's called amicus brief writers. So if this would get appealed, we would want other people with different perspectives to allow the court to understand that perspective, right? And for example, one thing that it's kind of gone back to Florida, right? It is a state that has the regulation of honeybees is from the state level. Anyone can do it, that kind of thing. It also has an Africanized population, right? So there is this release the bees, fear, or whatever. It's illogical, but that people's fears are genuine, whatever, what have you. But like what I would love to see is like the Beekeepers Association of Florida do an amicus to say, we haven't had any issues with a centralized regulation of honeybees in an Africanized state. In fact, for example, and I'm just making this up, maybe there was a more uptick on beekeeping. Maybe there was a bumper crop that the Department of Agriculture could, really put into the statistics of how it could really help a state on on an aggregate level. So just because you're not in West Virginia doesn't mean you can't help. Be an advocate.
Be an advocate,
Yes,
yes.
absolutely.
That's a really good point about about Florida being basically a higher risk state or location for beekeeping, and yet they have not, like you said, not had as a problem with the centralized, their Department of Agriculture dealing with beekeeping. So why would you want a smaller entity or lower down on the chain to start regulating arbitrarily? It just seems so counterintuitive and counterproductive for everyone, not just the beekeeper, like you said yourself. You want to obviously you want to win your case, right? Because you want to go on keeping bees. But for the larger effect of, multiple beekeepers being affected by that arbitrary regulation, it just has a cascade effect all the way up, where you're going to see, if we have less beekeepers, we have less bees. If we have less bees, we have less pollination. So less pollination equals less food. So the farmers are struggling. It just, yeah. There's a lot of multifaceted, like, ripple effects, if you will.
Especially with the problem of, aggressive bees and, the threat to the public. If you have, back to the beekeeper argument in general, if you have less beekeepers, less bee knowledge, less public, kind of talking
Interfacing.
about, like, hey kids, the wasps are really bad this year. You need to be really careful, because we not only, just common beekeepers, but, our Department of Ag is always trying to advocate, but warn, hey, yellow jackets, because of
absolutely.
the drought this year in West Virginia has been terrible. So we've seen way too many yellow jackets because the resources, have shifted. It's just something we have to keep up with. If we didn't have that knowledge, if we didn't have a bunch of beekeepers on Facebook sharing this stuff, then you would just have a lot of public fear, a lot of confusion around, yellow jacket attacks and bees and drought and all these things.
Well, and to think all the way down to what it would take. So I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, bees are invasive." You get that argument sometimes when you're talking about agriculture, even though we are talking about agriculture here.
The concern for native pollinators and
Yeah,
fear of
absolutely it is. But whether or not you have beekeepers in an area, you will have honeybees. I mean, they are here. They're not going anywhere. To eradicate every colony of honeybees is not possible.
Not really.
Not realistically.
Not at this point.
And if you don't have
in this country since since before this was a country.
Yeah.
They have been in North America since before the United States existed. So that predicates a lot of human arbitrary lines. Like I said, they cross geographic, religious, every boundary you could put in front of them, except for maybe some fine mesh screen.
And if you don't have beekeepers managing them in boxes, then they will be in people's homes and they'll be in people's structures. They will persist.
And and you won't have the knowledge base to help deal with it if it does become an issue.
Yeah, you don't have a crazy person with a sawzall and
a free weekend
to pull them out of your shed
to come
and
help
seal it back up. So especially, I think the big push is like native pollinators because they don't get a lot of shine, but honeybees are the poster child. We get a lot of the shine, but they're the people
flagship.
need to consider water use and pesticides and all the things that we do. A lot of the native pollinators don't get that shine, so any discussion around that just doesn't get brought up. But honeybees have that potential, so I think it's just something we all have to work on.
Yeah, I always like to use the analogy that honeybees are like our litmus test into our environmental world, like our insect, ambassadors. If we notice, obviously, that our honeybee colonies are not doing well for any specific reason, we just can infer from sheer logic that our native pollinators and native insects are not going to be doing well either. If it's something that we can trace, like pesticide exposure or excessive drought or what have you. And the more that you start to minimize the amount of beekeepers and bees that you're able to have that knowledge and insight, you're going to start running into problems that it takes longer to trace, and you're going to have bigger issues crop up.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, and
so important to protect bees.
I have yet to meet a beekeeper that doesn't like other bees and other like you said, gardening. It just, beekeeping opens you up to whatever life brings you. If it's gardening, if it's herbs, if it's canning,
and one thing, in my opinion, beekeeping is one of those hobbies or opportunities for multi-generational bonding, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
amen. Yeah.
As long as you can
Absolutely.
stand over a hive or what have you, be out in the open, I mean, that's where culture is made, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
passing on of that knowledge, like you guys were referencing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're at a
And
critical point for that too. We're
Yes.
running it into that issue of like we're losing a lot of generational knowledge because we don't have these intergenerational impasses to exchange.
Yeah.
And so the more that we create, an absence of those opportunities, I mean, it's no wonder that we lose knowledge every
Like
generation.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at least in
Critical.
West Virginia, right? I think the average age of a farmer is in their mid-60s, right?
It's very skewed to the higher end.
Where are we going to be when our food supply or our suppliers of that food, pass on?
Right.
It's a conversation that we need to have now instead of 20
Absolutely.
years down the road.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is a perfect like crystallization moment for all of these things to be discussed. It's unfortunate, obviously, to hear about this friction of people not
Yeah.
wanting to just at least, be open to.
And that's what makes it so important,
To the
because if we
bees.
have instances where, beekeeping's getting, kind of dissuaded or discouraged, you have even, more loss and more separation of nature, more separation of agriculture, less domestic food production. And that's just
For a state like West
that's not
Virginia,
good.
that's not a good place
like you
for us
said,
to be.
food connects us all. And if we're not if we're not fed well, if we're not doing well,
I mean,
we don't
just
got many
think
crops.
about the West Virginia seal, right? We have a miner and a farmer on it, right?
Mhm.
What is more quintessential West Virginia than being elbow deep in agriculture?
Absolutely.
Sustaining your own home,
Yeah.
creating your own food.
Mountaineers are always free.
Bees are
right?
even more than,
Absolutely.
for my, just personal anecdote, I use, products of the hive as my own personal sort of, I don't want to call it healthcare, but it does
It
help me
is.
improve my own health because I've not been able to find other ways, even through all of the crazy medicines and stuff that we have today with doctors. Propolis is still doing more for my chronic mouth ulcers than anything anyone can prescribe me. So
Christian, you're shining.
yeah, to me, it's a denial. For me, I would be saying you're denying me like my therapy of some, whatever I want to call it, because it does more for me than, just the honey that I get to enjoy and the pollination that I enjoy. So yeah, and just like I said, to add my own personal anecdote.
So many
Yeah.
things.
We really do appreciate you sharing with us,
Yes,
and we
thank you.
appreciate your struggle, because I know this is a struggle for you and it's been going on for over a year, at this point, a couple years
Yeah.
you've been dealing with all of this. So I hope that there's an end in sight for you soon. We hope to see some
Yes.
beehives thriving
We
for
will be
you in the
staying
future.
very
And
interested.
we will, and anything that we can do to help, we will absolutely do that. We thank everybody who's joined us. We've had well over 1,000 folks hanging out between YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook here. We pulled out all the stops. We just wanted to make sure we could reach as many people with this as possible. So thank you all for joining us, and we will post clips, and we will post this is the full video here on YouTube probably within the next couple hours. So folks can continue to watch and figure out ways that they can help us.
And don't forget to share and like.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah. Don't forget to like and
absolutely.
share. That's exactly right.
See,
you can do this.
you're natural.
Oh
gosh.
man. Hey, thank you so much,
Yes,
Alex.
yes.
Have
All
a
right,
great
guys.
afternoon, and we will talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Appreciate it.
All
Take
right,
care.
thank
Thank you
you.
so